To have this interview. This is part of my personal branding interview series, which I'm doing on my blog. So really appreciate you taking the time. I know during this pandemic scenario, there's a lot going on, and appreciate you doing this. Before we start, if I could request you to please introduce yourself, a couple of lines about your background and what you currently do, and then we'll dive into the questions.
Sure. So, thank you, Anisu. I think I was looking at your profile and this wonderful personal brand you're building for yourself. And congratulations on your book and the blog and the efforts you're putting in your corporate life as well. So great to be connected like this. Wonderful. So let me give a little bit of background about myself. I'm Dr. Sandeep Krishnan, and currently I'm a senior partner with a consulting firm called People Business. I'm a fellow, I'm a doctorate of IIM Ahmedabad and an engineer by profession. I started my career with the RPG Group, then moved on to consulting with Ernst& Young. I worked with IBM and Infosys, and currently I'm here with this firm. I work with a lot of organizations, both in the private and public sector, and also Indian and multinationals, in improving their leadership capabilities, human resource capabilities, and that's the area which I'm very passionate about. And in terms of some of my areas that I would have worked with, I'm also an author. I have written a book called The Making of a CEO, published by Penguin. I do a lot of writing. I write for magazines, professional magazines. I write for research journals. I'm also a visiting faculty at IIM Ahmedabad, where I teach the course Making of a CEO. The same course I teach at IIM Indore as well. So
Okay.
that's something which I have built over years in terms of developing leaders over a period of time. I hope that helps.
Oh, this is very fascinating. In fact, I'm quite intrigued by some of the stuff you do, including the research, because my interest is also in the research side of things. So probably post this call, we'll have a chat on that. So starting with the first question, so how would you define a personal brand? So what's your definition?
So, see, I see everybody has a brand, right?
Mhm.
I think each and every person, knowingly or unknowingly, has a brand. Now, how do you articulate that brand is very important. So that means that individual should have clarity in terms of what you want to project yourselves to be. For me, it is about I would like to be projecting as somebody who is a person who knows deep knowledge in the area that I'm working in, a person who is supportive of others, who wants to develop others, who also is a thorough professional in terms of how I work. So those are some of those focus areas that
Great.
I am
Okay,
really building my plan.
got it. So if I were to ask you in a line to kind of define what personal branding would be, what would that be? Is it how you articulate yourself or how you project yourself, or what would your definition be?
So in my case, for example, I would say it's about how people are perceiving you. That is one part of it. But
Mhm.
what is the reality of yours?
Mm,
I just look at it from a customer brand perspective. For example, you go and buy a soap, for example,
mm,
right? It's very you go and buy a soap, like for example, you buy a Dove.
mm,
You feel that to be like smooth, milky, it is soft. But if
mm,
you don't get that experience, you find rashness in your skin. What will happen? I mean, there is an image reality gap.
mm,
So one of the core thing about building a personal brand is that really you? There should be
mm,
very less image reality gap.
mm. Got it. Okay, brilliant. And I'm assuming that you know that you are a personal brand. So if I were to ask you, what are those signs that tells you that you are a personal brand?
See, in terms of there should be some level of recognition by people. That means, okay, you are known for something. If there is a need in that particular area, they will reach out to you.
Mm,
There are some people who are probably following in your on your social media platforms, so people know that okay, this is a person who is known in that particular area, and we would like to follow him, understand his or her thoughts. So
got
there
it.
is a level of professional network that you have built, and they are reaching out to you. I think those are
Got it.
some of those critical elements.
Got it. Got it. Okay. Brilliant. And if I were to ask you, so how does one go about building a brand? So in your journey, especially, you started in HR, then you moved into academics, and then you became an author. Now you're into consulting. So that journey, was there some thinking behind that? How you went about it?
Uh, yes. Many of those things, I think this famous Steve Jobs thing, right? You know, when you look back, you connect the dots, but when
Right.
you are there, you don't know really uh, whether it is planned or not. But I
Right.
think at over a period of time, you really find your area of passion, and
Okay.
then you kind of uh, you kind of build on that, you know. So I knew
Mm.
very well that, you know, leadership, consulting, human resources, that's an area of passion. And I think once I realized that's an area of passion, I could build on that. I think that's his, finding that passion was very important. Second is that my other passion was teaching.
Mm.
So constantly I build on my credentials in terms of, you know, research, in terms of teaching, keeping in touch with academic world. So,
Mm.
you know, that helped me in terms of that side of the branding, which merged together to what I believe is my professional brand.
Fantastic. Okay, great. I mean, so in a sense, what you're saying is that you need to be passionate about one area and then see which other complementary areas exist around it, and then see if it kind of has synergies. Is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
And if I were to say, what are those attributes? Like you mentioned, professional networks. You mentioned how people perceive you. So, what are some of those attributes of a personal brand? So, how do people associate you? Suppose you ask your, colleagues and your, faculty members. So, how would they call out some of those key attributes of your personal brand?
I think many of them they feel that I'm a kind of a thought leader, innovator in my field.
Okay.
They feel that I think ahead of the times in terms of building new solutions. They
Okay.
think that I can bring new ideas to the table.
Okay.
So and also they feel that I am a person who can be easily worked with. I mean, they can work with me easily. They find value in working with me.
Okay.
So those are the kind of things that I believe you know is crux of my personal brand.
Okay. Great. Fantastic. And based on your observations in your journey, so who, according to you, as a personal brand? I know you mentioned Steve Jobs, but apart from celebrities, is there people around you who you see as personal brands? If you can name a couple of names, and probably even explain what are some of those
I,
characteristics you admire about them.
so I can give some of the names. One person I really admire is one Tony Robbins. If you know about Tony,
Right.
he's a well-known author. He is a motivational speaker. He's a coach.
Right.
Tony, over a period of time, I think he's been very consistent.
Mm.
He has built up his image to be somebody whom we can look up to,
Mm.
who is a coach, who is a mentor. He has well-developed network, and is consistent in terms of saying, "I am a motivator. I am somebody who is there to help you." And
Mm.
he himself is build up his imagery and his own reality around that. And that
Mm.
is something which I feel is so. He is somebody whom I felt when I read his books and understanding everything. That is, I find that he has built a great brand. Then, in terms of some of the people whom we see in India, for example, I worked with Infosys,
Mhm.
and of course, when you work with Infosys, you meet Mr. Narayan Murthy,
Right.
and his level of thinking and his level of data orientation, his level of integrity, and
Mm.
his ability to speak up to what is right. I think that has been a consistent phenomenon in the Indian uh, IT industry or industry per se. So that is somebody who is a real personal brand, who
Mm.
has built something larger than himself, larger than the company. I mean, that's somebody whom we look up to.
Got it.
Then in my professional circles, I worked with one RPG. I worked with Dr. Arvind Agarwal. He was the NHRD president, and he
Mhm.
is somebody who was a CEO, moved to HR, very passionate about human resources and coaching,
Mm.
and he is
Mhm.
somebody who is well respected, and
Mm.
I believe that he's a great personal brand who has built it over years in the field.
Okay.
So those are the people whom I feel are great in terms of the personal brand. And if you look at from a Kerala perspective, I
Mm,
belong to Kerala. I've seen the V-Guard founder
mm,
Kochav
mm,
because he's a
mm,
person whom a lot of people look up to because his philanthropic activities,
mm,
his he's standing up for social causes. There's a
mm,
consistency in his leadership, and he
mm,
is himself donated his kidney
mm,
for a poor man. So those are the
mm.
kind of things that we, admire about those personalities.
Got it.
So they are
Fantastic.
some of those personal brands.
And during your journey, if you can now reflect back, were there some specific steps you took? Right? Like you mentioned, of course, some of the areas you're passionate about. Were there specific steps you took to build your brand, like which you can articulate? Were there two or three things which comes to your mind?
Yeah, I think there are. So I was conscious about what I would like to be, and in terms of building the brand. One is I built a pretty good, strong LinkedIn network because that is a good network that I've built. Or consistently, I've been writing there. I've been writing about my opinions, my thoughts. So that is something which I've consistently done. I've been a very active member of NHRD, especially the NHRD journal side,
Mhm.
wherein you research papers, you write papers there. I was the editor there in one of their issues, so that has really built up my network there.
Sure.
Third is in terms of teaching and
Mm,
researching. That network also help and to help a brand. For example, I am Ahmedabad is a great brand. So or
absolutely.
I am. So when you're associated with them, you work with them. I
Mm,
think that also rubs on you. So that has been an effort which I have put in. Fourth is in terms of the professional network. So I try
mm,
to connect with people in my network,
mm,
support them wherever required. So
mm.
that mutual respect and support has helped me in terms of the networking and also the personal branding.
Got it.
Then consulting definitely helps you in your branding because you work with so many clients, you work with so many professionals, and that also helps to build your brand. Those are the things which I feel has helped. And of course,
Okay.
writing the book gave me a good leverage because
Mm,
uh, it was out in open. Penkin was a good publisher, so that
mm.
also helped in branding.
Okay, great. I love the articulation you've done. It seems like it's very clear in your head as to what you were trying to achieve. So, when in terms of the challenges most personal brands face, so can you think back on your career and what are some of the challenges came across, obstacles that you came across?
See, one thing which is realize is there is an outside in branding and there's an inside out branding. And let me
Mm,
explain that.
mm,
Most of us work with some companies,
mm,
and companies are definitely big brands, right?
mm,
When you work with the Infosys, work with an IBM, those are like really big brands. And
mm,
then most of the time, you might have built some personal brand outside,
mm,
but companies don't bother about that.
mm,
Companies say that he knows people know him, it's good, but for
mm,
them, I think the internal brand building is important. That means how do you work there? How do you contribute? How do you really, support the business? I think
mm,
that is important. So
mm,
your internal brand building is a very important factor, and then
mm,
supplement with the external. I think when you build something very big external, and probably you come inside,
mm,
sometimes that image reality gap can be bigger.
mm,
So one thing to always put in mind is that okay, I might have some brand building outside, but internally you should prove your value every day. I think that is a big.
mm. Got
Second,
it.
I think one mistake which I would have done is probably I shifted some jobs,
Mm,
pretty period
mm,
of time actually in my
mm,
career, which I
mm,
feel was not something great.
mm,
And
mm,
although now I've been in a firm for almost 7 years, but
mm,
those quick shifts I don't think was something which is should be done
mm.
because, as I said, inside branding is very important where you stabilize, you contribute, and effectively build that brand.
Mhm. Got it. Brilliant, brilliant. I really love the points. I like the inside in and outside inside out and outside in perspective. That's really interesting. And when if you're thinking of while you were in this journey of building your brand, what are some of the things that you gained and some of the things that you lost? I know you mentioned about the credibility and the reputation and the respect, but is there some things which, apart from that you gained, and anything that you lost along the way? Because when you invest in this, you also lose, for example, time. You can't do other stuff which may be important to you. So how do you react to that?
I think you rightly articulate an investment, right? Investment in terms of time and effort. So if I am going and teaching, I'm teaching it beyond my work hours, and I'm teaching it pro bono many times. I'm doing it in my week on my weekends, and
Yeah.
or I might take a late evening time to do some teaching or research or writing. Writing, I used to write the book after 11 o'clock in the night. I mean, then I
Okay.
was, trying to do that. So when you're doing that, you are putting in extra efforts. So that definitely is, you're probably compromising at your family or, your personal time.
Mm,
But again, it's an investment and it's
mm,
an effort. But you have to enjoy it. I mean, you're
mm,
not doing something just for the branding sake. You're just doing something which you really enjoy. And
mm,
if branding comes, it's incidental.
mm. Got it. Okay. Brilliant. Okay. And what is your advice for someone who's starting out fresh? I mean, they may be a graduate, they may be, just out of college. They're starting out their brand. What is the first step he or she must take?
Uh, I think I've gone through some of your insights also, Anisu, and one thing which struck me was your insight about specialization.
Mm,
See, in your earlier in your career, you need to be known for something.
mm,
If you are, for example, if you are in, say, in a technology, you
correct.
should be somebody whom people respect. You. Oh, this guy really knows. If I'm in, say, in computer, in a IT, I should, when say I'm doing Java, I should be really an expert in Java. I should be
Mm,
something really good in, say, UI UX design, or I
mm,
might be really good in human resources. One area, people look up to you.
mm,
Once you garner such a knowledge, I think rest
mm,
of the things you can build up.
mm,
But a hollow drum can make a lot of noise, but after that but it's not music.
mhm.
So
Okay.
uh, music comes from that expertise, or how to make
Mm,
the noise the right noise.
mm,
So
okay.
somebody should really invest in himself and herself. That is one in terms of learning a trade, learning a subject. I think that's important. Second element is trying to build a network because now it is so much available with social media,
Yeah.
LinkedIn. Connect up with people, but also you should have your point of view because otherwise the network is of not much use. So that is
Mm,
something which is.
got it.
And third is that like the point which I made, build your
Mm,
internal. That means
mm,
the character that you show, how you
mm,
treat others, how you
mm,
treat strangers. I think
mm,
that is an important element because
mm,
once you treat others well, once you are
mm,
seen as somebody who is really reliable, hardworking, trustworthy, the basic
mm,
ingredients are very important. Otherwise, it's very
mm,
difficult,
mm.
sustain you.
Okay.
That's what I would say is advice.
Right. Fantastic. Okay. I'm just making some notes while we speak. So, if I were to ask you, reflecting on your personal journey, if you were to change one thing, what would that be? So, looking back, I know it's obviously not easy to change anything right now, but what would come to your mind?
I think the point that you made, I'm fairly specialized in terms of some of the areas that I work in, but I
Right.
think some more specialization always helps. I
Okay.
could have, gone a little bit more deeper in some of the areas, and that's an opportunity. Probably I could have invested a lot more in terms of, I do some lot of LinkedIn writing, etc. But using videos, using social media better.
Mm,
Twitter, I don't do much on Twitter. Twitter is I didn't invest much in that, but that is a big
mm,
medium. It's probably I lost out. I could have started early
mm,
on that as well, along
mm,
with LinkedIn. So those are the kind of things which probably would have helped in. But sometimes consistently putting in that efforts would have helped. But I've
got it.
done a lot of things which I wanted to do, and I'm pretty much happy about it. Uh, yeah,
Okay. Cool. And if I were to ask you to define or give you a recipe, what's your mantra for personal branding success? If you were to advise someone, so what would that be in a short sentence? How would you define it?
See, I think the mantra is really what you want to be. What is your story, right?
Mm,
And that's very important because if you want
mm,
to be everything, you
mm,
can't be anything. So
mm,
you need to define what you are. What
mm,
you can't be, for example, you want to be a knowledge person, you people will look up to an expert, or you want to be known as somebody who is like, an entertainer. You want to be seen
mm,
as somebody who is a great researcher. You need to
mm,
define what you are and then work around it. You want to be defined as a great doctor, you want to be
mm.
defined as a social worker, a politician. I think those characteristics which map to what is your this thing, that is the crux. Once
Got
you
it.
do that, when you build up everything around it, I think
Mm,
it just story starts weaving.
got it.
Because without the central concept of the story, there is no story, right? It will be only
Mm,
few words. So the
mm,
story should have a central concept, and that's personal brand. The central concept is important. I think
mm,
that's and second is that have confidence.
mm.
If you don't have
Got
the
it.
confidence, I don't think
Mm,
anything's going to happen. If you don't believe
mm,
in yourself, I don't think others
mm,
will believe.
mm. Got it. Okay, interesting. Uh, with now this pandemic going on, and there are a lot of other crises which take place. Now, as a personal brand, what must they be doing new or differently, or should they continue doing the same thing? Because uh, should they pause what they're doing? Should they revisit what they're doing? So how do you advise a personal brand in this kind of a scenario?
You see, sometimes the sensitivities are very important.
Mm,
For example, some of the you see, some of our celebrities are continuing to do what they do best. They showcase themselves. They are showing out their workout videos, and
mm,
many people are criticizing that. Saying
mm,
that
mm,
it's not the right time. You do it in your
mm,
personal time. I don't want to
mm,
see it. So
mm,
people are going through a lot of tough times, but you don't know when how it will be reacted by people
mm,
might be suffering at this point of time.
mm,
So that
mm.
sensitivity is important, but
Right.
uh, you can't help it. People continue to do what they do. They make their comments. They do a lot of stuff. So
Mm,
that might impact their brand. Yeah, and second thing which
mm.
they need to do is also be sensitive to situation and try to do things in alignment with that. Really trying to help with their expertise,
Got it.
whatever it is. I
Okay.
think that is important
Mm,
at this time. There is a
got it.
very interesting thing on
Okay.
personal brand. It's about George Bush Jr. George Bush
Mm-hmm.
Jr. He won the election, right? I mean, he was considered like, people considered somebody who is a fool, somebody who is dumb. Opposition
Mm,
was fighting on that. He is known to be a weed smoker and everything. But he still won. I
mm,
mean, that was surprising.
mm,
And some an analysis
mm,
in terms of why.
mm,
And one thing which they said is that every George Bush Jr.'s brand was very much alignment with his actions. So
mm,
whatever he spoke, whatever he did was well in alignment with his actions, or
mm,
whatever brand he had. So there was no
mm,
inconsistency. People
mm,
don't like inconsistencies.
mm,
So when you are
mm,
having the personal brand, it's better to avoid the inconsistencies, and that would really help.
mm. Interesting. Very nice point. Uh, Sandeep, the last question I had was around millennials. Now there are, Gen Z, millennials, and all of them want to get famous quickly on YouTube and other places. What's your advice for them about building a personal brand?
I think there's a little bit of herd mentality, but also there is a lot of individual players as well.
Mm,
Because everybody trying to be the same is not going to help because there's no
mm,
brand, personal brand.
mm,
You need to be unique. You need to be, doing something different. You need to be having your own unique flavor to the curry,
mm,
right? So
mm,
I think that's an important element. I think the only advice is find your niche, work on
mm,
that, and
mm,
build on that. If you're really good at something, focus on that rather than trying to do what others are doing. And that's
mm.
my only advice today. but there are a lot of talented people out there, and I think they should
Mm.
showcase what they're really talented in, rather than
Mm.
going forward.
Got it. Brilliant. I really loved all your, pointers. Very succinct, very simple, to the point. I really loved it. Thank you so much for taking the time to do this interview at short notice. Appreciate it. And what I'll do is post this. I will share the transcript with you before it goes live, so you'll get a chance to be on it.
Thank you so much, Anisu, and it was wonderful talking to you. Very good questions, and I know it's great to talk to an expert in this field. So, all the best for your next book and your blogs and interviews.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much. In fact, if you can hold on